which is why create the Americans with Disabilities Act. This is actually quotes from Congress at that time that I found this so interesting. Individuals with disabilities continually encounter various forms of discrimination, including outright intentional exclusion, the discriminatory effects of architectural, transportation, and communication barriers, overprotective rules and policies, failure to make modifications to existing facilities and practices, exclusionary qualification standards and criteria, segregation to lesser services, programs, activities, benefits, jobs, or other opportunities. So that's something that was put out by Congress at that time, which was in 1990, when 43 million of the United States citizens had disabilities. So, and as you see here, it does say, you know, people with disabilities, they've had a history of discrimination and restrictions. It was, and you know, in some places still thought that people with disabilities occupy an inferior status in our society, which is a big reason why I am doing this, just to, you know, break that down and open that up. So, on to the next slide. These are the goals of the Americans with Disabilities Act: to assure equality of opportunity, full participation, independent living, and economic self-sufficiency for such individuals. I was discussing this a little earlier with the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's very general in a lot of things that they say that are written there. For instance, it says buildings have to have an accessible entrance. It doesn't have to be a front entrance. So you can go into a restaurant that may have steps, and I have been to a restaurant that has 2 front doors, 4 steps to get in. You know, I can walk with crutches, so the steps are not a problem for me, but I expressed to the owner, who I was friends with, and, you know, I said, well, you're kind of excluding people, you know, and you're saying that people who have to use a wheelchair won't, you know, don't come to these places. It's a restaurant during the day, and it is a nightclub at night. And, you know, he said, oh no, we have an entrance, we have an accessible entrance. Anybody want to guess where it was? In the kitchen. Because they have to have a ramp for deliveries. Yes, and this is recent. It's, you know, a very popular, I won't say where it is, but it's a very popular road in Camden County, you know, very main. It's on 73 somewhere. That's all I'm saying. 73 goes a long way. You know, but I expressed to him, okay, you know, thanks, but no thanks. I'm not taking my chances with a grease fire if, you know, but then I also said I would take my chances with a grease fire versus having somebody lift me down those 5 steps after you've all been drinking every, you know, all night. So it's, you know, but legally he's not breaking the law. He has an accessible entrance.
Wow.
So, you know, it's those little things, but also, you know, they're very big things.
But
Yes.
there are people that are breaking the law still.
Oh yes, for sure.
Because we went to an art gallery in Mount Holly. My wife's in a wheelchair. She's disabled. And she could not get in that place to see the artist
Right.
who was her friend. And also there's a dentist in Moorestown that has no access for the disabled person.
See, and in those cases, being Morristown and you said Mount Holly, if the building is considered to be a historic building,
Yeah.
they may not have to do it. They're covered under the law.
Wow.
Yeah, they're covered under the law because, like this building here, they don't necessarily have to do, you know, make accommodations because it is a historical building. If it will detract and, you know, lessen the historical value of a building, they're protected. So, you know, that might you know, that might or might not be the case in those. But, you know, being Mount Holly and Morristown, there are a lot of older places. Yeah, there are a lot of older buildings that they've converted into other, you know, things that they use for today. So that might be the reason why. Also places, big thing I've found, places that don't have elevators. But through developing our view and reading the Americans with Disabilities Act, if there are under a certain square feet in a building, they don't have to put an elevator. They can have, you know, they can have 5 floors, but if it's still under the, I believe it's 2,000 square feet, they don't have to have, it's a ridiculous amount of, you know, feet that they, you know, they don't have to legally put in an elevator. So, you know, they're, like I said, they've come a long way. Thank you for creating it, but, you know, we still need to work on a lot of things to improve it that a lot of people are not aware of. You know, as far as, like I was just telling you about the historical, you know, if they're a historical building, they're protected. So it may not, you know, they may not be breaking any law.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Is it that you have to, like if you're planning on going someplace, you have to check to make sure that it is handicap accessible?
Yes.
Or like when you went to New York that time?
Oh yes, New York is fun. I love New York. I do. I go to see plays, which I will give them credit. They do have, the theaters are old. So a lot of the old theaters do not have elevators. They will give you 1 seat for yourself and a companion seat in the orchestra at their cheapest price. Whatever their cheapest ticket is, they give you 2 tickets. You know, you have to buy both tickets, but they'll be, you know, $50 or $60. So, but what you're referring to is when we went to Brooklyn that time?
Yes.
And it's funny now. It wasn't funny at all at the time. She's still upset by it a year later. Went to Brooklyn. I was going into Manhattan. I took the subway by myself. And I was able to get on the subway to go into Manhattan. Got off at the same stop in Brooklyn when I was coming home. There's no elevator on that side to get me back up to the street.
Oh. But they said there was.
Right. There, you know, it's 2 stops up. You know, so it's get back on the train, get off 2 stops, and then, you know, either wheel back or, you know, catch this bus and then that bus just to get me back to our hotel. So, you know, you would think a popular city like New York would either have, you know, an elevator at every stop or, you know, at least have some kind of map or something that would show you, but that's not the case. And, you know, I called down to the front desk at the hotel. He told me, you know, oh yeah, it's right across the street. He didn't mention that there was no elevator on the return side. So. Yeah, so it's a lot of things that situations that I run into that, you know, are out of my control. And yes, I will tell them how I got up to I actually crawled up the steps to get to the street, just, and she's still upset by that. But, yeah, so you know, and people were very friendly and very helpful. You know, somebody did carry my chair up for me. And, you know, a guy made sure that I was okay getting up the steps. And so it's, you know, they've come a long way because they do, in New York, they do have buses that have wheelchair lifts and everything. So, you know, and that's the excuse, that's the reason that they would give me, oh, you know, don't take the subway, take the bus, because there's buses that do the same thing. And that's how they get around putting elevators. So there's a way around just about everything. Yes. So I would, did you have a question? Okay. I would like to highlight a few landmark court cases from people that have sued because of, you know, and used the Americans with Disabilities Act as their reason for suing. The first case is Bragdon versus Abbott. Miss Abbott, she's a female who was infected with HIV in 1986. She attended an appointment at her dentist in 1994. The dentist completed the examination and he discovered a cavity, that she had a cavity. He then informed her that his policy was, he had a policy against filling cavities of patients that were HIV infected. He offered to perform the work at a hospital with no added fee for service, though she would be responsible for the cost of using the hospital facilities. She filed suit under the Americans with Disabilities Act, Section 302, which says that no individual should be discriminated against by a person who operates a place of public accommodation, which includes doctor's offices. Does anybody want to take a guess at how that turned out?
She won.
She won.
She won. She won because the court ruled that her HIV status prohibited her from reproducing. So that is something that is covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Yes, the reproduction, yes. So, you know, I was researching and I found that case and I thought it was very, very interesting. They also make a note that says this is not a blanket case, that it's not, it's not for everybody, that each case will be heard and, determined on a case-by-case basis. But this was a very interesting thing because most people do not think of, reproducing as, something that would be covered, but it is covered under the Major Life Functions portion of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The next case, which the title, I guess, did not show up, is Murphy versus UPS. UPS hired Mr. Vaughn Murphy as a mechanic, a position that required him to drive commercial vehicles. Mr. Murphy was diagnosed with hypertension, high blood pressure, when he was 10 years old. To drive, he had to satisfy certain Department of Transportation health requirements, including having no current clinical diagnosis of high blood pressure. They completely missed that on his exam. And once they found out, he was fired. Wow. So, and again,